Yeah, real quick too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll end on this. You know, we drove out to Springfield the other day, and I typically don't drive the Mass Pike, but I do have a fast lane transponder in my vehicle, and I rode on the Mass Pike and didn't hit any traffic at all leaving Boston. Now it took me probably, I don't know, maybe just under 2 hours or 2 hours to get from Boston to Springfield. It would take me close to that to get back home to the city of New Bedford, leaving at the same exact time, except sitting on a parking lot on the expressway or even on Route 24. So I will say that, you know, many of my constituents have said this to me, that the big dig has not directly benefited them. So why should the burden of the big dig be pushed from the folks who benefit from it onto many of my constituents who don't directly benefit from it? And that's, you know, and I'm just relaying the message that I've heard from many constituents living in my district, and that is one of the biggest, I think, resistances that you'll see.
Thank you, Representative. What we will do, I know that there are a number of folks in the audience who want to participate and testify, but just so you know, this is our opportunity as well as committee members, and one of the few opportunities we get to ask questions relative to the bill. So I know that you're anxious to come and testify. We'll be here until the last one of you wants to testify, but at the same time, just want you all to know that this is our opportunity as well as committee members. So we have two more committee members who want to ask questions, then we're going to open it back up to the public. Representative Fernandez.
Thank you, Secretary Aloisi, for coming. And I just want to take a moment to express a Metro West view of this, because you talk about regional equity, and to Representative Kness's points relative to traveling the Turnpike, I would invite him to join me on a drive home from Boston at about 4:30, and we would spend that 2 hours someplace between the Alston and Newton exits. It would not get much further. Or coming in, even on a Sunday night, trying to get through the 128 tolls, and we'd spend about a half hour between the 128 and the Weston tolls, which is about a mile or less. Because of the congestion on those roadways. The Mass Turnpike used to be a road we could travel quickly. It isn't any longer at most locations. The Metro West view of this, as you know, Secretary Aloisi, is higher tolls, higher gas taxes is about as lose-lose as we can get. So we're hoping that whatever the solution is, it's not both, because that's simply not acceptable to the delegation that comes from anywhere from that western toll out to where I am at 495 and possibly even out to the Worcester area. So I look at the bill, and what I don't see in that bill is anything that tells me that even if we roll back the toll increases that are planned for March and July and implement as much as the full 19-cent gas tax, that 2 years from now we won't see toll increases. And that 2 years from now, or even a shorter timeline, we won't see T-fare increases or parking lot increases, which affect my constituents as well, because I have a constituency that uses the T out of Franklin, that uses the Pike, and it may use neither of those, so that we are a mixed group of constituents. So I'm very mindful of all of those things. I don't see it in there, and I'm not looking for an answer to any of these questions today. Because we do want to get to the people who are here, but I would bring that to your attention because I don't see that in the bill. I would also ask you to consider, because this has come up with a lot of people that I've talked to who are angry initially about the governor's plan. When we talk about the level of the reforms that have either been undertaken so far or planned in either of the bills, there is a sort of take-back impression that, okay, if you're true with those, won't those generate a certain amount of revenue immediately upon implementation that can be driven back into some of the problems we have, inclusive of paying the big dig debt? And isn't that a way to do it, at least initially, so that you can prove to us the reforms will work? Because execution of transportation policy is a major problem for the credibility of the Massachusetts highway system. There's no question about it. The other part of that is people are recognizing and accepting the fact that the gas tax hasn't gone up since 1991, and that dollar then is not worth today what it was, and accepting of some moderate increase that might make up and adjust to that inflation, along with the reforms, even in this tough economy, might be saleable, but to go to the entire length has been said that 19 cents is not saleable, and that anything we do ought to be recognizing of the economic situation we're in and phased in over a number of years, and I'm just not talking 2 years or 3 years, but even 4 or 5 or 6, so that we can adjust and absorb any kind of an increase as the economy bottoms and then recovers. And people might be accepting of that kind of an approach to this as well, because I'm doubtful we can even spend all 19 cents at once, even though we have the need all at once to do so. There are many issues that I could talk about. One question I have that I'd like to take back to you, to where Chairman Wagner went on the 85% or 81% employees. One of my questions has been about that. Are those employees project-specific employees? Because it's not unusual to go out for bond and have a clerk of the works or engineers that are project-specific included in the bill. We are actually bonding out 80% of our Mass Highway employees. That's absurd.
It is absurd. We agree on that.
And to Chairman Wagner's point at previous hearings, the governor has asked us for several kinds of revenues. And looking at the larger picture, we had a very sobering discussion this morning about the state of the economy, our anticipated revenues, our budget deficits. The governor needs to think long and hard about where this all fits in to the overall need, because there's only going to be so far we can go with anything at this time or in the few years that are to come. So I just ask you to take all of those things into consideration. I'm going to challenge you as an attorney, and I'm going to challenge you as a politician to not necessarily answer all of those right now, but to take them back with you for future discussions.
I'd like to answer at least one, because it's important for me to let folks here know, two. What kind of savings come immediately after reform? One of the biggest, most high-profile reforms, unfortunately, doesn't create a lot of savings in the early years. Its biggest savings come in the out years, and that is the T pension reforms, the T healthcare reforms. Because it's a pension reform and it's forward-looking, the biggest savings come in the 10 years out, 15 years out. Unfortunately, they don't come in the early years. So that's a reform that I think we all agree have to do, but it doesn't give you an immediate big financial return. Now, a reform that does give you a big financial return is moving these highway department employees off the capital budget. That immediately frees up $52 million of road projects. So that goes back into the district. But you need 2 cents of the gas tax to get the 52. That's the issue. So some of these reforms will show you modest initial savings and the bigger ones down the road. Some have a bigger bang for the buck earlier. In terms of the toll road, from what I've seen, and we can share this with you, we can hold back on a toll increase for at least 4 years. But let me make a point. We would still be underfunding our capital needs there. You know, we've built something that is very expensive to operate and maintain. But I think the governor has said he doesn't want a gas tax increase and a toll increase. I think the speaker has been public about his concern about the toll increase. And as I say, I think as hard as it is for people to hear, asking our fellow brothers and sisters, citizens, in places like Saugus or Lynn or Swampscott or Revere to pay $7 at the tolls, I don't think anyone thinks that's right. I think we've got to solve it. And that's the dilemma that we're in.
Okay, now, just so you all know that we're bipartisan, the last question from the committee members will be from the Assistant Minority Leader, Representative George Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here again this evening. I've got a couple of quick questions, and you don't have to answer them tonight either, but how much the Western tolls, 1 through 6, we know, are in essence toll-free.
Yes.
Can you give me a number on what that will generate or
Yes.
anticipated?
$16 million.
$16 million. Now, I know that we can't sort of slide that over under the
14. Alan says 14.
Okay, 14 million. 14. There has been some discussion, or at least press reports, of the possibility of requiring project labor agreements on some of the construction work, or if not a lot of the construction work that might be generated out of this. That would be a concern to me, and I would hopefully it would be open bid type situation.
It's the first I've heard of it, Representative, so that's not something I've heard of.
All right. And